After Ray Chapman was tragically killed after getting hit by a pitch in 1920, new rules required fresh white balls to always be in use. But for some, they wondered what if the ball wasn't just cleaner, but a completely different color. That color was yellow. Bright yellow baseballs had been tested at the college level and caught the attention of Brooklyn Dodgers president Larry McPhail in 1938. McPhail, known for trying anything to spice up the game, would then give it a real shot mid-season. The yellow ball was designed by a color scientist who believed that yellow would be easier to see for both hitters and fielders, improving safety and maybe even boosting offense. The Dodgers tried it out against the Cardinals in 1938 in the first game of a doubleheader, and then again in 2 more games the following year. And they found the dye using the yellow baseballs started to run during the games, making the ball damp and, ironically, deader. Instead of more scoring, there was less. Fans were impressed, players didn't love it, and the experiment quietly disappeared. While ballparks eventually adopted darker hitting backgrounds to improve visibility with traditional white balls, the idea of colored baseballs didn't die entirely. In the early 1970s, Oakland A's owner Charlie Finley tried one last pitch, a bright orange baseball. It lasted exactly 1 exhibition game before they gave it a firm no. And before we continue, we have a daily newsletter that gives you stories from the strange world of sports, along with new updates. It's completely free if you're interested, and a link will be available in the description and the comments. It was the final day of the regular season at the Polo Grounds in 1942, and the New York Giants had an idea to help the war effort. Offer free admission to any kid who showed up with scrap metal to donate for America's fight in World War II. It seemed to be a good idea on paper, but what they didn't count on was just how many kids would show up. Thousands of children descended on the ballpark, arms full of metal and excitement. The Giants won the first game of their doubleheader against the Boston Braves 6-4, and were leading the second game 5-2 as the bottom of the 8th inning began. And then some kids who may have been confused and excited thought the game was over, and they stormed the field with childlike joy. And as kids would do, they followed the leader, and more kids joined them on the field, until the field was overrun by an unstoppable tide of scrap metal wielding youth. And as order cannot be restored, the umpires had no choice but to declare a forfeit win for the Braves, who were losing 5-2. Brave starter Warren Spahn, making just the second start of his soon-to-be Hall of Fame career, was credited with a complete game, but not a win. That left him with a strange season stat line of a 0-0 record with a complete game, something that hasn't happened again, just like this promotion. Maybe the most infamous promotion that they should have known was going then wrong was 10-cent beer night. The Cleveland Indians front office had been making bad decisions for decades at that point, and thinking it was a good idea to lure thousands of baseball fans into a stadium with the promise of unlimited beer just 10 cents a cup may have been their worst. On June 4, 1974, Cleveland hosted the Texas Rangers at Municipal Stadium. The two teams had already traded punches in a brawl game just a week earlier in Texas, so tensions were high before a single pitch was thrown. And that night, 25,000 fans would show up, which was twice the usual. And from the first pitch, things were out of control. Drunk fans ran on the field, some of them not wearing clothes. They lit firecrackers, smoked marijuana openly, while others trashed and much more towards players, such as Rangers first baseman and future Indians manager Mike Hargrove, who narrowly avoided a wine jug to the head that someone obviously brought on their own. Despite escalating chaos, Cleveland's management kept the beer flowing, with little security present. Even when the Indians tied the game at 5 in the bottom of the 9th with the winning run on second, it wasn't enough to distract from the chaos. When a fan stole Jeff Burrell's cap and he tripped trying to get it back, Rangers manager Billy Martin had seen enough. He sent his team out with bats in hand to defend themselves against the fans. And unsurprisingly, that made things much worse and triggered a full-on riot. Fans stormed the field in droves, fights broke out, players from both teams were hit, tackled, and punched until the Indians were forced to help their rivals. The umpires then had no choice but to forfeit the game to the Rangers. Only 9 fans would end up being arrested, and cheap beer was never allowed at the games again. So thankfully it's only $20 a cup now. And also right up there amongst the most remembered promotions gone wrong is Disco Demolition Night. Bill Veeck was one of baseball's great characters and most ambitious owners in terms of doing almost anything to bring in fans, such as allowing fans to be the manager for a game, moving the fans in or out based on who they were playing, introducing dog bat boys, and most famously, sending 3'7" Eddie Goodell up to bat. But his most infamous one is Disco Demolition Night. In the summer of 1979, disco fever still had a grip on America, but a growing number of people did not like the disco. Hoping to tap into that anti-disco rage, gave the green light to one of the most infamous ideas in baseball history. During a twilight doubleheader against the Detroit Tigers, the White Sox offered admission for just 98 cents, as long as you brought a disco record to be destroyed between the games. The 98-cent price was a nod to a local rock station who was sponsoring the event. They expected maybe 15,000 fans, and instead, over 50,000 showed up, and thousands more had to be turned away at the gates. The promotion worked too well. Records piled up quickly, so the staff stopped collecting them, leaving frustrated fans with finals in hands that they would turn into frisbees. With fireworks, alcohol, and a rowdy crowd, even the first game that the Sox won 4-1 barely stayed on track. But then came the main event, which was the demolition of the disco records. Between games, a massive crate of disco records were rolled onto the field, and they were blown up in center field. And that would be the spark for all hell to break loose. The crowd would flood the field, ripping up the turf, setting small fires, and turning Comiskey Park into a small war zone. Riot police had to be called in, only 39 arrests were made, and the second game was officially forfeited to the Tigers because the field was too damaged to play on. This is still the last American League game to be forfeited, as many see this night as the start of the decline of the disco. Probably the most shameless one here, that really shies away from the family atmosphere of baseball, was wet T-shirt night. Outside of a year or two, the Atlanta Braves struggled since they moved from Milwaukee. With the team destined for 101 losses, the Braves were struggling to bring in fans. And their solution was to put a shameless spin on Ladies' Day at the park. On May 30th, 1977, 11,451 fans, unsurprisingly mostly men, showed up to see the 13-24 Braves take on the Chicago Cubs. But really, most showed up for the main event taking place after the game. And they were committed, as though rain threatened the night, delaying the first pitch by 2 hours. Absolutely no one was leaving. They could have let the contestants stand outside and let nature do the work. This was a real setup with a full panel of judges, who really wanted to do the work themselves. And the game itself was nothing to remember, as the lowly Braves would end up losing 13-4. And somewhere around the 6th inning, the Braves announced that registration for the contest was open, in full view of the fans, so everyone could watch the girls sign up. And unsurprisingly, it took a moment for the first Brave volunteer to walk up, but when she did, 42 other girls followed. And finally, after the last out was made, the entertainment that most came out for would begin. And the winner was allegedly the daughter of a Methodist minister, probably down an award she displayed in front of her family or talked about at church. Braves owner Ted Turner tried many bold promotions, such as ostrich races and wrestling matches after the game. But wet T-shirt night goes down as probably the most desperate and again the most shameless, that I'm assuming won't happen again. Another of Bill Veeck's most memorable promotions that is hilarious to look back on is White Sox Shorts Night. Well, it's hard enough now to wear a White Sox uniform. Imagine back in 1976, if you came to the park and were told that you would be wearing shorts, not for batting practice, but for the actual game. Something Chris Edwards' Scissorhands Sale would not enjoy. And before the season, players had actually modeled the shorts as a part of a fashion show, but none of them thought they'd actually be wearing them on the field. And when the day came when they found out they would be wearing those shorts, Goose Gossage joked that he needed time to shave his legs. First baseman Lamar Johnson would tell people he'll have the nicest thighs you'll ever see. And the shorts they modeled, and later actually wore in a game, were Bermuda-style shorts with old-school collared jerseys, reminiscent of a men's beer league softball team who stole the jerseys from a 1970s youth kickball team. They weren't actually the first team to do it. The Hollywood Stars of the Pacific Coast League tried in the 50s, but the White Sox were the first and only team to bring them to the majors. And there's a reason they were the only team. Put simply, they didn't look good. Maybe some like them, but at the end of the day, there's a reason baseball players have never worn shorts. And what's funny is, they wore shorts in 3 games, and they won all 3, and even went 8 for 8 in stolen base attempts, risking scrapes and bruises to bare knees while sliding. It's kinda surprising they didn't keep going considering baseball superstitions, but still, 3 games were enough. The players hated them, fans didn't like them, and Veeck called it a fad, although most fads are at least enjoyed for a little bit of time. And considering they were undefeated, maybe it's time for the current White Sox to bring them back, since they don't have much to lose anyway. Free giveaways are a tradition in baseball, with fans lining down the block so they can sell the item on eBay right away. But one thing they won't get is hard baseballs, and that's because of Ball Night. In 1995, the Los Angeles Dodgers gave out free baseballs with Tommy Lasorda's signature, and of course a corporate sponsor, to 15,000 of 53,000 fans who were 14 and younger, who all followed in the Dodger Stadium without much thought of it possibly going wrong. It all started fine, but by the 7th inning, things started to unravel. The Dodgers were in a tight game against the St. Louis Cardinals, and it was in the 7th inning when the Cardinals had a mound visit, and fans became impatient, and they started throwing balls onto the field. Not really because of anger, but more because of boredom, causing a 15-minute delay with thousands of balls still in the stands. But things would start to unravel in the 8th inning. The Dodgers scored 1 to make things 2-1. With a few runners on and Eric Karros up, he would end up going down looking on a close call. That was the wrong call. Karros and Lasorda let him know, and without anyone really knowing, Karros would be ejected from the game. Cardinals closer John Mabry came in the bottom of the 9th after nearly being hit by a ball coming out of the bullpen, as other Cardinals would start being used as targets. And right away, Raul Mendezi would work the count to 3-0. Then he watched 2 clear balls be called strikes. He then struck out on a pitch off the plate, and he let the umpire know what he thought. And then he would be ejected. And that would be the breaking point, as baseballs started flying all over the stadium. Tommy Lasorda also began waving his arms. Some saw it as a notion to bring more, and the balls kept coming, along with bottles, boxes, and even an apple. Brave ball boys would then clear everything, filling up almost 20 buckets of baseballs, and then the game would resume. And as the reluctant Cardinals went back to their positions, a baseball from the stands landed close to Brian Jordan. He held it up, and that's when the umpires decided to wrap things up and call this game a forfeit in the Cardinals' favor. The Cardinals were most likely going to win, though of course you never know. The umpires put a lot of blame on Tommy Lasorda, which was very unfair, but more blame can be put on management for even giving out hard baseballs in the first place, which put an end to that for good. It was the first forfeit in 41 years in the National League. It's still the most recent forfeit in Major League Baseball. And our last one belongs to the infamous Turn Ahead the Clock night. By the late 1990s, Major League Baseball struck gold with everything classic. Throwback uniforms, old-timey stadiums, even some films had fans loving the past, as had always been a thing. So instead of delving more into that, they decided what if we did the opposite and looked towards the future. And the idea was Turn Ahead the Clock night, a league-wide stunt meant to show fans the future of baseball. And it was more like a low-budget sci-fi vision of baseball, with teams suiting up in futuristic uniforms, which was fun, but not everyone cared for these shiny, oversized sort of softball-looking uniforms. Tampa Bay pitcher Rick White calling them something my wife would wear to bed. All but 8 teams participated, and it wasn't just about the uniforms. It was a full-blown rebrand for a day. It was supposed to be set in the highly advanced year of 2021, and teams like the New York Mets became the Mercury Mets. Orioles ball girls were renamed Orb Girls, and players weren't in left field, they were in the left sector, and shortstop was renamed Intermediate Station. The Turn Ahead the Clock games were spread out over 2.5 months, and gave some great moments, like Larry Walker's walk-off home run, and the Mariners coming out and turning their caps backwards. Pretty obvious whose idea that was. But the reception ultimately wasn't great. The uniforms were criticized, and the promotion was unsuccessful. The Mariners, who created this whole thing, commemorated the 20th anniversary by wearing the jerseys again in 2018. The whole thing looked on a little more fondly now, especially with this all a little similar to the City Connects. But it did not have a sequel, and none of the players got to reach 2021, as they all tragically died during the Y2K. So much of these promotions come down to a guy with a crazy idea to draw people to the ballpark. And for most of these, the worst thing that can happen is the promotion actually working, especially when you mix in alcohol, hard baseballs, or disco. Or sometimes a team tries to make a bold fashion statement, and it is just not well received. In the future, maybe the Athletics will try a wild promotion to bring out fans by playing in a real Major League park without John Fisher.